Welcome to what I wish could be a 5-hour episode of Leadership Rediscovered. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, and I am so pumped today to be joined by the Bill Simon.
You're very kind.
Thank you for being here,
Thank
Bill.
you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Bill Simon is the Group Vice President Sales North America for McCormick's. He leads the U.S. and Canadian internal and external sales teams responsible for driving profitable growth across retail, club, mass, e-commerce, dollar, and drug channels. Bill also leads McCormick's customer strategic planning, category management, revenue management, sales planning, and sales technology activities for the McCormick, Frank's, French's, Cholula, Stubbs, Zatarain's, Lowry's, Old Bay, Thai Kitchen, and Kitchen Basics brands. Bill began his career with McCormick in 2014 and most recently served as Vice President of Sales, U.S. Consumer Products. Prior to McCormick, Bill held a variety of sales, R&D, revenue management, and marketing positions during a 20-year career with H.J. Heinz. During that time, he was primarily focused on building sales strategies and go-to-market models for food service and retail sales teams. There, he led the transformation of both the Heinz ketchup and/or Ida businesses through comprehensive pricing, promotion, and go-to-market strategies. Bill holds a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing and a Master of Business Administration in Marketing and Finance from Pennsylvania State University. He currently sits on the board of the St. Joseph's Food Marketing Program as well as the University Scholars Program at Penn State. Wow.
Yeah.
Good stuff there.
It sounds impressive.
It is impressive. And what this bio tells us is that you have a lot of credibility. And I know firsthand that you're a great businessman and also far and away one of the best leaders I've ever worked with.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
So I'm very excited to have you here today and to share all of your gifts and wisdom with us.
I look forward to it. So thanks again for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
All right, so bring this bio to life.
Yeah.
Take me on a deep dive here of your leadership journey, if you
So
would.
30 years in a nutshell?
Yeah.
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 What I would say is, I was very blessed coming out of grad school. So I started actually at ADP in sales, and I decided that I didn't want to be in sales. So I went back to Penn State for my MBA in finance and marketing. And lo and behold, I ended up in sales for the last 27 years. So,
I was going to say.
No, I started in so that journey started actually as an unpaid intern at Heinz. So there was a hiring freeze. Yeah. So that came with obviously a bit of humble pie and learned a ton about myself and started that journey for about 2 years in marketing. And then I was asked to start up a new department called trade marketing. And that started me on my journey of internal sales, where I spent the bulk of my time at Heinz, close to 15 years of the 20 in internal sales, which for most folks, they're like, what the heck is that? And basically, it's anything that enables sales success, anything that leaves the building, insights, analytics, pricing, ultimately putting the sales team in a position to be successful. That was what my team was ultimately accountable for.
Kind of like the behind the scenes that makes the sales.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. Yeah, and ultimately shepherding and balancing the company agenda with the customer agenda, because those two are sometimes in conflict and sometimes they're in sync. So that was a tremendous learning across those 15 years. And you would say, hey, how did you last 15 years? Well, it was subsequent expansion of the role and ultimately leading to North American accountability across food service, which is basically restaurants, and the consumer space, which was grocery stores.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was a really cool journey. And then, be careful what you wish for a moment was, hey, I really want to be a general manager. That was what I was classically trained to do. And I went to the CEO at the time, and he said, you know what, we believe that you can actually do that. But before you do that, we're going to test you. And it was one of the best, at the time, it wasn't my reaction, but it was one of the best learning experiences I ever had. And I was blessed with a great team. And I was thrust into an R&D capacity with no technical skill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And basically, I was put in charge of what they called CCI, which was basically cost out and efficiency. So anything that the consumer wasn't willing to pay for, we were charged with optimizing products, but not denigrating quality, which is a really delicate balance, or
Right.
working in the plants to minimize waste, things of that nature. And the team at the time was remarkably talented, but they were also stuck on a number that had been fairly predictive, and we were asked to have a meaningful change in trajectory. And so here comes the sales guy into a technical community.
I love that.
Yeah, it was, talk about being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? And understanding where you had leverage, understanding where you had value, maybe better said, where you could apply principles that you learned in sales and commercial to a technical community, but also finding out, who was ultimately with you to have a seismic shift in performance. And then ultimately, what was the advocacy and change management necessary to drive that on their behalf?
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of listening, a lot of learning, right? Particularly on the front end. And I was really proud. I mean, that first year we came close to doubling it. We didn't double it completely. Yeah. So, and that's a testament to the folks on the ground and the folks that did that, and ultimately figuring out ways to enable their success. And then, you know me from a brief stint in my roadmap, right? So the company was acquired, which was a remarkable learning. It was, personally and professionally, a really interesting window for me. And I ended up taking a role for family and actually for change management too with Mylan Pharmaceuticals. And I have no regrets on that. It was an 11-month journey. That's where I obviously met you, and I met some great people along the way. And I actually still apply some learnings from Mylan, despite the fact that that was a very short stint. It wasn't my cup of tea, but it was just a tremendous learning experience in a great company. And I was in charge of commercial performance and insight. So I was thrust into A, new industry, B, new form team, new architecture. Didn't really have knew everything, right? And not realizing, frankly, where the change management curve was where I entered. Boss was great, full advocacy. I felt tremendous support from, frankly, my functional partners, you, finance, others. But it clearly was a stretch that was beyond where I thought I could have elongated impact. I felt like I had short-term impact, but I didn't feel like I was going to have elongated impact. Opportunity at McCormick came up to run sales, which I had never run the full sales function. I had run portions of sales. And that was just a dream job for me. And it was working for a gentleman that I knew for 15 years who I knew had a really strong read on the culture, really strong read on me personally, where, my pros and cons were and where I could add value and where I would have to learn, and I would need some stretch and some rope and some support. And he put me in that position. It's been a remarkable ride. We've had tremendous performance relative to peer group, relative to, frankly, my expectations. And just like I think anyone that sits at this table with you, it's more about the people that delivered and their story and what we've been able to watch and see, and watching people achieve what they didn't think was possible. Tremendous amounts of change, particularly in the first 3 to 4 years, which we can certainly talk about. And I'm still, I'm in that role now almost 8 years, and that's the longest I've been. I mean, it certainly has expanded as we've acquired and built the business, but the fact that I'm still invigorated, I still see tremendous opportunity, is a testament not only to McCormick, but it's also a testament to where I see the business going and where I think we can take the organization to.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, it's such a good journey. And like I said, it's detailed in the bio, but I wanted you to bring it to life. And you added a lot of great pieces and parts that I think are important to understand the full picture of who Bill is, and especially in terms of your background.
The professional Bill. We're gonna stick with professional Bill, right? Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. We don't want to flirt with that too much.
Exactly. But I think, and you're right. I had the great fortune of getting to work with you, and so what's helpful to me and what has impacted and prepared some of the questions that I have for you today is the fact that I have gotten to see you in action. And it allows us to, go a little bit deeper, I think, hopefully. But I am curious to hear how you would describe your leadership style.
Yeah, you were kind enough to send some questions in advance, and this one I think is really tough because I view it more as principles in terms of what makes an effective leader
Mm-hmm.
versus style. Because I think stylistically, I don't necessarily know if I would have anyone mimic it because I think you really have to find your true north and your true self.
Yeah.
And what I've found is where advocacy is strongest is the agility to accept people for who they are and
Mm.
leverage the variability that exists both personally and professionally. And being
Mm-hmm.
sensitive and empathetic to that
Yeah.
is where success intersects. Now, in fairness, I still feel like I'm perfecting that craft.
Mm-hmm.
But some principles that have guided me, and I'm sure we may retrace some of these steps. And I've used this with my daughters. So I have two daughters, 22 and 19. So one's starting her professional journey and one's trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But one mantra that I used to use, frankly, commuting from Pittsburgh to Milan and now commuting to Baltimore for McCormick is work hard to be great. And it's
Mm.
a personal philosophy. It was ingrained in me early from my dad. And it was all about effort can outstrip talent and
I
effort
love that.
can outstrip natural ability. And I see it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you ever achieve your fullest potential until that is ultimately realized. And that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean nights, weekends, sacrificing family, faith, or anything else
Good
that's
point.
right. So
Yes.
striking the balance that's right for you.
Mm-hmm.
But there are sacrifices along the way that we've
Mm-hmm.
all had to make, choices that we've had to make, and it has to intersect productively with those forces
Yeah.
personally. But that one's guided me quite a bit. I never wanted to lose based on effort. If I was going to lose, it was because I was, you know, I went down a path and I learned something, or I
Mm-hmm.
took something away from it. I think the other tenets for me would be accessibility
Mm.
and humility,
Yes.
and then also another one that rhymes would be agility. And when I look at those forces, I want folks to be comfortable approaching me with both ideas and issues. I have a phrase where you can't fix what you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
can't address what you don't know. I don't care what it
Yes.
is, and the whole notion of accessibility and 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 not taking yourself too seriously, such that you can have these type of
Mm-hmm.
discussions across the desk with someone very junior to the most senior folks,
Yeah.
I think is really critical to get the best out of folks, to know that they're heard,
Absolutely.
to know that they're valued. All the things about rewards, recognition, certainly you can see all that well documented, but I
Mm-hmm.
think the intrinsic value that leaders create is tapping into that point of differentiation successfully.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that motivation is personal. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I need more flexibility. You know what? We're going to do that for you, and here's where you go. Or I need a stretch assignment, and here's how I'm thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, let's map that out.
Yeah.
And just being flexible such that you can afford folks to achieve their greatest potential. And then the last one that I look for, I mean, it's not the only thing I look for, but I really do believe that a differentiating factor is curiosity.
Me
You
too.
do? Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
We've never talked about this,
I
so
know.
it all gets back to, and I've used this with others. Once you stop learning, you're in a desperate need for a change. Like if
Yes.
McCormick had not provided these challenges for
Yes.
me, all of them productive, but some of them pretty darn tough.
Mm-hmm.
I would start to wither, and I would start to need to fill that
Mm-hmm.
gap. And I see it repeatedly. Like high performers want to learn, want to stretch, want to grow, and with that, the fundamental predictor of that is curiosity,
Yes.
right? The
Yes.
willingness to challenge your conventional thinking, or really, frankly, challenging whether you were right or wrong as a leader, or
Mm-hmm.
whether your recommendation was, you know what, that wasn't the best path. And to decipher that on the interview process, or to decipher that across the desk, is pretty intriguing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because a lot of folks that
I was
I
gonna say,
work,
how do you do that?
well, it's interesting because I try to, if it's an interview, I try to deduce whether the individual has made a mistake, because
Oh.
I really don't believe you've truly tapped curiosity to the fullest extent unless you've made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly recount many personally or professionally. We don't have to go into all of them, but and those are learning moments that are really impactful. They're
Yes.
not necessarily the most they're not the fondest sometimes,
Yes.
as long as they're not crisis.
Right.
Right?
But usually those tough moments are what ends up making you better in the long run, or that
Yeah.
you take something from it, you take a learning experience from that.
I do. I mean, sometimes they come in the form of a challenge where it's like, okay, this is going to test me. It's going to test my
Yeah.
capacity. It's going to test me on multiple vectors. It's going to challenge how I've approached things in the past because the problem is so vastly different, or it's multidimensional. I haven't seen things, clash together like this.
Yes.
So I know I'm talking in circles, but at the end of the day, what I look for, you can get that. I interview a lot of folks that are just wicked smart, analytically grounded folks. I interview a lot of folks that are faced with and ultimately charged with navigating the customer productively. So my team is comprised of probably, call it 50, 60 individuals that are inside sales, what I used to do.
Yes.
And the rest are outside customer facing, right?
So cool. So you have both.
So I have both.
Which are sometimes different personalities.
100%. And frankly, what my vision, or I should say what my definition of what was successful has moderated dramatically over the last 8, 9 years. And we can certainly talk about that. So you can absolutely test curiosity based on the ability to accept failure and then reapply. You can absolutely test curiosity based on problem identification and then ultimately solution mapping, right? Like, hey, talk to me about the solutions. And if it's very linear, it probably hasn't hit the degree that you would probably want versus degrees of optionality that are provided to you as a leader and or to the individual. There are a few tactics that I use, but those are some.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
I remember there's so much literature, and I know you've been a part of this too, where you're in organizations and you're trying to determine high potential employees. And every company defines it differently, and there's all kinds of think tanks out there that try to model what is a high potential employee. But there was one model that I remember coming across that I thought was probably the simplest but a great predictor, and that was learning agility.
Yeah.
Does the person have learning agility?
Yeah.
Which,
and I think agility,
to me, learning agility and curiosity, kind of go hand in hand. But I thought, if I think back to people who I would at least, and others have deemed high potential, they all did have that common thread.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you 100%, and it comes in various forms too, right? It doesn't have there's no one. I mean, that's probably an overused cliche, but there's no one footprint and or model where that manifests itself.
Right.
And I've learned that a lot over the course of time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I did a deep dive on your LinkedIn profile.
Oh, no.
And I was really intrigued because
I feel like I need to update that.
No. It was good. It's good.
Okay.
But I looked at recommendations that people wrote for you,
Oh,
and I loved them.
Yeah. I haven't looked at that in ages.
Oh, it's so good, because what I loved about it is that a lot of times recommendations can be very generic and, like, well, Bill's a great guy, a very thought-provoking leader. They use all the corporate jargon and all that. Yeah. But these people know you. They know how.
You're going to jog some memories if you cite some specifics.
So I'm going to call out one in particular. So a gentleman, Marty, wrote, quote, Bill has tremendous brights and strong interpersonals to match. He is the total package.
Oh, very kind.
And I loved that because I can validate that firsthand. I think one of the things that stands out and differentiates you in my mind is you have really high IQ, but you also have really high EQ, and you don't always see that in balance with someone. And I'd just like to hear your take on, is that a learned thing? Is that your default wiring, and how you hold that in balance?
Yeah, so, you and I talked before this started that I'm not necessarily convinced the IQ portion is as high as what Marty, and I've worked with Marty for over probably a quarter century, so I know him really well.
Marty knows and I know, so we
say.
Okay,
so you say.
We are the authority on Bill.
Therefore, it's the truth.
Yeah.
I would say my default mechanism has always, particularly as a leader. So I think there's an important delineation here, and we can certainly talk about this too further, is the leap from individual contributor to leader, right?
Yes.
And so I think IQ and curiosity and analytical rigor and financial acumen and the things that are classically trained in an MBA program, or frankly in many great companies that affords you the opportunity to garner those competencies and skills, is a delineating factor in building out your foundation of the house, right? And so I think the reason I put work hard to be great, I never felt like I was the IQ guy. I felt like I was sufficient. I didn't feel like I was, I've been around just brilliant people, even to this day, that just blow me away. You know,
awesome.
and I've had the pleasure of learning from them, even as of yesterday when we're talking about some strategy work. But so I felt like I was sufficient, and then I always felt like I had to work harder to try to figure it out. So I think the IQ is so important to understanding problems, to defining solutions, presenting case studies, storytelling, things of that nature, really, really critical and so pronounced early, right?
Yes.
In addition
Yes.
to, the ability to convey message, right? Yeah, and
Yes.
particularly early in your career, because there's so many really bright minds that struggle with that communication and that influence mechanism. The EQ is my natural default. What's interesting is at work, and I think my wife would agree with this. At work, I'm heavy EQ. That comes out in every test that I've ever taken.
Yeah.
Like I'm very driven. I'm very results oriented, and I'm heavy EQ. And I wanna have fun, and
Yeah.
I want high energy. I want positive energy. Not,
Yeah.
and I know I'm saying me, but I want the group to feel that
Yes.
way. I want the group to feel really passionate. And if I don't sense that energy, it makes me uncomfortable, frankly. But what I want surrounding me is a ton of IQ that we can then immobilize and marshal and
Sure.
activate, right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of a very delicate balance for me, because my biggest watch out is taking EQ up to fifth gear way too fast before the organization's ready to rally.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got to temper my enthusiasm, and I would say the biggest watch out for a heavy EQ, heavy energy person
Yes.
is active listening,
Yeah.
right? And how do you slow your roll? How do you think about moments in time to say, "Hey, tell me more about that"? That's that is a phrase that was given to me 15 years ago, and I still use it to this day, from Dave
Yes.
Moran. And those that are listening from Heinz know who Dave is. And Dave is like, you've got to slow down. You've got to ask more questions. You've got to clarify. And once you've got you've got 80% of the picture, get 100,
Yeah.
and then roll, and people will follow you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yes.
I don't necessarily know if I don't know if you ever perfect the balance between those two forces, regardless of whether you're EQ, IQ, or some other strength relative to those dimensions.
Yes.
You could say you're always sharpening the saw, or
Sure.
other means by which you can harness the craft.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And some of that's situational as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are times where I would say the EQ, where I feel I would like to think that people would agree with this, but at least I would hope. I would hope that they feel where EQ comes out in the most genuine and most material ways is caring.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
I am a very emotive person. I will my former VP, who just retired, of internal sales, who I adored, she was with me for 8 years. She just retired, and she goes, "You are going to cry, aren't you?" And I go, "Yeah, I
Oh.
am. Like, I'm really proud of what the team did, or I'm really proud that this individual achieved what they didn't think was possible." And I just think that um, that genuine caring for individual, company, culture, the whole shoot and match is a really big delineator, as to, because at the end of the day, why is someone following you? Why is someone
Bingo.
right? Like, why is someone placing their career, which everyone has a degree of fragility associated
Yes.
with their professional journey, and how do you establish trust? How do you pull them through that system, and know that you've got their back?
Yes.
With constructs on performance, with constructs on what is realistic, with the ability to have the hard conversations. All that fun stuff can still come with a underpinning of caring, thoughtfulness, respect, and that's that I believe is where my EQ is strongest.
And yes, and I would have to agree. And
I'd like to think.
what's that?
I'd like to think anyway.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
again, because I know you and I've seen you in action. The cool thing is I got to see you in action, but I also got to see you behind the scenes when you
Yep.
weren't in front of a group, or
Right,
just
right.
a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah,
And you're
sure.
consistent. You're the same either way, whether it's in a group of 500 people or one person. But I agree. I think because you're a very genuine, authentic person, that caring does come out. And at the end of the day, do I want to work for the smartest person in the room, or do I want to work for someone who cares about me? I mean, if I have to choose between those two,
Yeah.
again, in my mind, you bring both to the table. But if I had to choose, honestly, I'd rather work for someone that I know has my back and cares about me,
Yeah,
because,
the
that's
power of I tell people all the time. Sorry to cut you off.
no.
I tell people all the time. The currency that is most important for you to really test is advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And are you given the degrees of freedom to be, again, your best self and
Yes.
achieve what you think is possible? And people are knocking things down, and it's not incumbent upon them to pull you through the system entirely. That is disproportionately on you. But
Right.
are they an impediment, or are they an advocate? Are
Mm-hmm.
they putting up roadblocks? Are they someone that you feel like, you know what? I know if I work hard, if I deliver, and the time is right, good things are going to happen.
Yes.
And I've been blessed with, gosh, out of my 30 plus years of professional experience, I've had some pretty funky bosses, but I had one for 12 years at Heinz that was continuous, that I adore. I've had three at McCormick that all have, different sizes, shapes, and
Yep.
leadership models, but there was one common thread: high trust, high advocacy, right?
Nice.
And
Yes.
when you don't have it is when you realize just how powerful it is,
Yes.
right? Just how
Yes, you
powerful it is.
realize, and how
Yeah,
important it
how
is.
important it is for your just mental health, your ability to be
Mm-hmm.
successful, your ability to be balanced at home. Like if you feel like
Yes.
you're under duress, um, that can take a toll.
Yeah,
That can take a real toll.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. And it's good to hear that you have those examples, both, positive, and then maybe some that you're like, not as big of a fan of.
Yeah.
So I know you've led a lot of teams, and
Hmm.
I'd love to hear your comparison, and maybe this is where, because I do want to hear you talk about moving from individual contributor to
Yeah.
leader for the first time. But maybe biggest team you've ever led, smallest
Sure.
team, and
Yeah.
then compare and contrast those.
Yeah. So let's see. The first team was Ketchup. You know,
Nice.
I was the trade marketing manager of Ketchup. Was the first time we did a national, like I own national Ketchup. I mean, people are
That's
like,
kind
well,
of
how?
exciting.
Yeah, and I remember my father-in-law saying, well, how hard is it to sell ketchup? And he's from Pittsburgh, so he's
Yeah.
it's an 85 market share. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, you got a point there. But I had a team. I had a team of two.
Oh,
Yeah,
very cool.
and one I still keep in touch with, Angie. So Angie, if you're listening, or if you do listen, you know who you are, because she was my first hire. Yeah,
Oh,
and
very
yeah,
cool.
and I just remember being as nervous as probably they were,
Yeah.
being very uncomfortable, because now I'm like, you know what, they're counting on me, and boy, did I. I learned a lot, and I matured a lot too. I don't think
Hmm.
I fully. I think it took me a full decade to truly get to a place that was, I would argue, effective to very effective,
Hmm.
because I was so detail oriented, analytically inclined. I didn't shed the individual contributor fast enough,
Gotcha.
because I felt my self worth was associated with that.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right. So much of your value is placed in that role, and I don't think, I've always said there's two things that are really tough to get prepared for. That first role, I don't care if
Hmm.
it's 2 people, 10 people, 20.
Hmm.
And the first time you're managing, you're leading leaders, right? So a
Yes,
VP
that's a
leading,
transition too.
huge, a
Hmm.
much larger gap from my vantage point, and nothing. And I don't think much. I think you can get some practical experience in that, but it really is, at that point, it's your innate skills to navigate some things. And I've watched people on board, and I love watching them go through that process. So, first team was Ketchup, and again, I would say, gosh, I was 28. I
Yeah.
mean, I had hair. It was a different time. I still needed a comb at work. And I learned the basic lessons that you would expect in that stage. I think the big move for me, I think I was right at 30. I got the director of internal sales for, at the time, condiments and sauces. So now I'm leading, three of me previously. So I have,
Wow.
folks that are very well educated,
Hmm.
MBA and or more experienced than me. That's also
Well,
a
yeah, because
really,
you're young,
I'm young.
30. Hmm.
I'm in my early 30s, maybe even 30. Um, and that was a big pivot, which is, okay,
Yeah.
now I've got really bright minds
Hmm.
who can go toe to toe with me intellectually, and how do I galvanize this team? How do I set a vision for what we want to be, in addition to what we have to deliver, right? So that practical reality of I wasn't brought there for status quo.
Right.
I wasn't placed there to hold the line. I was placed there to take our capabilities, competencies, and ultimately our products that we delivered to the team to the next level, which we were able to achieve. And how do you determine, another valuable lesson, which frankly came later on too, is how do you determine who's on board and who's not?
Ooh. How'd you do that?
That lesson didn't come, and it came too late. I'll take you through that. Maybe I'll wait on that one.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you. I'll give that to you. But I think the director role at Heinz is where I started to get my glide path, that, and I started to realize just the value of working with and through others and influence, and then also setting. I had a really good series of bosses there too on how do you set the vision. And even if it's narrow, like this was, it was one of our biggest businesses, but it wasn't the full shooting match.
Right.
So I was in between individual contributor, setting the stage for this sub-department, but also had to be I had deference, to the broader strategy, both company and function.
Yeah, so you're in that middle.
I'm in that middle space. I'm not actually setting full strategy, but I'm also trying to break this team into a different place, right? So that was a lot of fun. And frankly, what I learned there is I tried to do it via listening and then ultimately translating versus us building it together. And that was a mistake. And I would say, and again, I've seen examples where that has to happen, most notably when you're in strife, where you've got just, you're under duress, or you've got a huge opportunity that is time-based and there is no time or there's limited time to enroll and enlist. You've got, okay, we've got a job to do.
To go this way.
We got to go. We got to go. And I need to know that you're all in. By the way, in the next hour, we're going to determine if we're all in or not. Right. So there's been instances like that. But I think that first director role, I tried to do too much of the strategy setting and not enough enrolling and enlisting. And I learned some valuable lessons there too. And then they finally worked themselves out. I would say some of the biggest learning for me in terms of enroll and enlist was when I was asked, and this was a tough assignment, I was asked to move from total U.S. consumer products accountability to, hey, Bill, we want you to run North America, which was the restaurant industry and the retail group. So I had a really strong retail group. I had, frozen. This was the biggest division at Heinz.
Yeah.
And I had two really strong directors. I had, we hired a lot of great talent. We had built that team up on multiple dimensions. That's a story for another day. So I was blessed with great leaders.
That's great. That helps a lot.
100%. And they and the first thing they said, this is when you've kind of hit pay dirt with these folks. And it was Bill and Bill. So we were the three amigos because it was the three Bills. And they came to me and they said, look, we got it. We got it. We know what you want to do. We know what you got to do. And you've got to get that. And we've got your back here.
Oh, cool.
And it was super cool. Like, it's one of those ones where that's a tear up moment for me. I'm like tearing up right now just thinking about it. And those guys would punch me in the head if they knew that was coming. But, they were remarkably gifted folks. And so that enabled me to go in. And when something has been a really valuable lesson as it relates to that silent dissenter piece is the food service business was in strife. It was by far the most successful business at Heinz. And it went through a really tumultuous 3-year window. And I was brought in there by the president to say, hey, get after it, fix it. And, I'm a outsider from the other division. These divisions knew each other, but they didn't cross-pollinate talent. They didn't, because it was a very different business model.
I was going to say, I could see how that would be very siloed because it is quite different.
It's huge. It's a huge disparity in terms of go-to-market. It's consumer products selling is I've got 10 accounts and I have the same 10 accounts at McCormick that I did at Heinz that represent about 80% of the business. So a lot of it is cultivating relationships and selling in capabilities. It's not the hunter-gatherer.
Right.
Where restaurants, there's a million of them.
Yes.
And you need hunter-gatherers.
Yeah.
Right? You need folks that know how to close, how to prospect. And so those those requirements for success were vastly different.
Yeah.
And the sales team knew that, and they would call BS on that. It's like, okay, who's this guy? So
couldn't do my job.
No, but we the catalyst event to rally the team together was the fact that performance had been so rough, and this team was used to being paid out. They were used to delivering best in class, not only for the company, but for the industry. This was a well-respected organization. Not that it lost that, but it was definitely in strife. And I was asked to fix it, right now, because it was, I won't go into the details, but it was tough. And I felt, so then what you find, and this was the learning, and again, sorry for being so verbose on this
great.
one. You think, it's that change curve, right? You think you've got them, and you go down, the Change Monster is a great book. It's a very quick read.
Change Monster. I don't think I've heard of that
Yeah,
one.
Star Model and, all the classic examples of change. But Change Monster suggests that the journey is not linear, which most people that have done,
makes sense.
right?
Yeah.
And that there are fits, restarts, and things of that nature that you have to be mindful of before you actually go up the curve.
Okay.
And you're going to get setbacks. You just don't really anticipate them. And the most dangerous individual in a change curve is the silent dissenter.
Yes.
Right? So they're and particularly if they're on your leadership table.
Yes.
And I encountered that several times throughout my career, but never more than that window. And I completely get it.
Sure.
Because
it makes sense as to why.
Pride. It had nothing to do with ego, in my opinion. It was all like, look, we have been wildly successful. I get what you're trying to do. We're going to get through this. We don't need you. And what I was seeing in the P&L first and foremost is, yeah, you do, and we got to move like tomorrow, And how do you paint that picture to get the masses, and then how do you snuff out, and really call to action those that are dissenting? And what do you do, right? Like, how do you enroll and enlist them, and how do you address that? It's probably one of the most uncomfortable series of conversations I had, because the individual, that name I won't mention, the individual that I had to discuss things with was wildly respected, by myself included, and had built up a wall that was problematic, right? So, what do? Okay, you address it individually first, multiple times. Try to enroll and enlist. Try to actually make them a showcase. I would say the most valuable lesson I learned there is, how do you showcase that individual as the change catalyst?
Yes. And it's interesting because
'Cause
a
then
lot
they're
of
in
people
role.
try to push that person as far away as they can. Don't talk to the problem children, or leave that person out of this. And I'm like, bring them in.
Bring them in. And yeah, so, but that took some time. But boy, what a valuable lesson, because I encountered that again. And when you start to see it, you can react to it faster, right? So, and McCormick never. So I was asked to drive a lot of change at McCormick, which was more of a contemporization effort. The team was wildly successful, but it had 3 years of substandard performance in 2012 to 2014 before I joined. And it's like, look, we need your expertise here, and here. But I was, a guy that didn't, carry the bag, and
Right.
I was the sales strategy guy, the capabilities guy. So how do I enroll and list 2/3 of my organization that's like, wait a minute, he never called on Walmart, he never called on Kroger. What the heck
He's
is
going
he?
to try to tell us how
He's
to
gonna
do it?
Yeah. So, went on a learning journey there for about 90 days, and then I purposefully tapped into some wildly talented people that were really passionate, but also needed contemporization, and showcased them.
Very cool.
Showcased them and brought them into the loop. And, most made it. Most actually did a great job. Not all. But painting a vision, particularly when you're in strife of, are we really happy where we are, can be a tremendous motivator.
That's a really good way of framing it.
Right? But if you're
Yes.
wildly successful,
Yeah.
and then trying to create a catalyst for change, that's a pretty challenging window.
Nothing's broken. Why do we
so
need to fix this?
Exactly right. So anyway, those are some. I know we went down a series of rabbit holes, but hopefully helpful as it relates to change, and what I've been able to learn and influence. And I'm still, every situation's different,
Yes.
right? So I'm still learning as it relates to that.
Yeah, but so I have a couple follow-up questions to that. You were talking about showcasing.
Yeah.
Can we just go tactical real quick and just talk about some examples of
Sure.
how you do that and how you get, some of these dissenters pulled
Yeah,
in?
I think part of it's education, and part of it is knowing the venue to put them in a position, and how do you approach that individual. I'll use an example, and I don't think he'll ever listen to this. He's retired, and
We have a big audience.
I don't know. We'll see. So a gentleman by the name of Randy at McCormick for 32 years when I arrived. He ran our Publix business. He was internal sales. He was well respected, for at least from what I could deduce, and I thought he was very effective. And there was a cultural setting aspect to him. Particularly, and McCormick at that point,
he kind of had influence, a high
he did,
level
and there
of
were
influence and following.
Yeah, and there were a few. And when I walked in the door, the 3 external direct reports that I had a combined experience of 105 years at McCormick.
Oh my!
So 30 years plus at McCormick doing sales, being brought through that system. So had seen everything. I could never replicate what these 3 talented individuals who had gone through. So certainly they were critical, but they also just saw a catalyst change, meaning their boss they've got a new boss. So typically that creates some motivation to be receptive. But the bowels of the organization is where the change occurs, right? Yes. And that's where ultimately it had to happen. So fortunately, those 3 gentlemen, 2 of which still work for me, were able to help me navigate that cultural onboarding, which I thought was going to be easier than it was, and I'm still learning, frankly. I think you always do. For sure. But this gentleman, Randy, so what we were trying to let me describe what we were trying to do. So we were building out capabilities that we actually had to fund. So we actually had to make choices within our budget to take away from X and move to Y. Revenue management, which is basically pricing analytics that had not existed before, and then really bolstering our category management team.
Gotcha.
Which I had a passion for, because ultimately I was tasked with, hey, contemporize, right? Which I said, but contemporization comes through insights, analytics, tools, capabilities. And what I quickly deduced is that this sales team was wildly successful, but in a very narrow space. They were asked to execute.
Oh, okay.
Right. So they were being asked to execute in a very narrow space, at least from my vantage point. And the other thing that I thought was criminal is they really weren't exposed to the P&L. They weren't exposed to the analytics. They really, this was a team that was thirsting, but had not been afforded that opportunity to really even understand how things were working.
Couldn't tap into their curiosity, any natural curiosity.
Right, because it was do.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? So, and it worked. I mean, it worked for a very, very, very long time. So that's not meant to be disparaging. It just is what it is. So I'll focus in on revenue management. Revenue management ultimately is taking a look at your customer investments, your pricing strategies, and trying to maximize that for customer and for company.
Yeah.
Right. So where's that sweet spot? And when it was very apparent to me that folks had not been exposed to the P&L, I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't know that what they're doing is denigrating, the P&L.
The impact that they have.
Exactly. And when you're top line only focused, and that's how you're incented and that's how you're rewarded, that is frankly what they should be doing.
Right.
So it's not like anyone was doing anything wrong. But then we started to expose it to the leadership team. So my team was educated, but subsequently the director community really is, I think, where strategy is ultimately, culture will eat strategy for lunch. You've heard that probably repeated 4,000 times. And the cultural setting doesn't sit around my table. It actually sits a tad lower, in my opinion. And the execution and who we ultimately are accountable to are the salespeople that have to, grind it out and work with customers every single day. So I always felt like that accordion effect. And Randy, I was like, you know what? Okay, here is a guy that has tons of passion, but doesn't know. And there's a few others, but I'm using Randy as an example. And he was pissed, like pissed. He's like, Bill, I had no idea that this is what was going on.
Wow.
And I go, Randy, would you mind if I tapped into you as we launch this? And what I'd
there's
like
probably other Randys out there.
There were a lot, and rightfully so, right? Maybe Randy may disagree, and he'll probably, here's what I know: if Randy disagrees, he's going to reach out to you.
Okay,
but I had Randy speak at the sales meeting. And so I really, my sales meetings, which we haven't had a live one in a while, which I desperately miss. But how do you showcase lower to create activation with credibility?
Yes.
Versus the talking mouth
Yes.
that is, theoretically too far removed from
Sure.
Bill.
Disconnected from the day-to-day
Yeah,
reality.
exactly right. So now here's a guy that's fighting it out every day with his team,
Mhm.
frustrated. Can I get him to be my flag-waving patriot?
Oh, that's
Right?
awesome.
And Randy took it. He said, I'm there. He was one of the first ones to grab the flag. And I'm still indebted to him for doing that because,
Yeah.
and I had a couple others that paved the way because that first couple years at McCormick, first and foremost, I didn't meet much resistance because the team was used to high performing. So that was the wonderful gift of
Good.
the 30, 40, 50 years of success that preceded, my arrival. And they were pissed off from a macro perspective of just not achieving what they felt like was appropriate. And they wanted to be more aggressive. They wanted to fix, but they weren't necessarily sure what they had to fix.
Yeah.
Right? So the fact that we could get a guy like Randy, and there's a couple other cases that, I won't belabor the point, but the power of that.
Yes.
I would have never done that at 30. It would have been about Bill.
Sure.
Right?
Well, you could have so easily walked in and said,
Yeah.
I'm the boss now,
Yeah.
and we're going to do it this way, my way, because I said so.
Yeah.
And think about how that would have gone over.
Or stage time,
Yes.
not validation time,
Yes.
not the practical realities of how do you bring that to life with a customer experience. And I've used that tactic in a genuine and thoughtful fashion,
Yes.
not in
manipulation.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
Because that doesn't go.
They would have me out on the street pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I've used that many times at McCormick, most notably, and I think back on other instances at Heinz, most notably, where gosh, if I had done that, had I used that approach, which again comes with maturity, vulnerability, right? Like
and humility.
Yeah.
Because if you've got too much ego to be able to kind of step to the side and showcase someone else and let someone else shine and be the example instead of, and maybe get some of the credit instead of Bill getting the credit and Bill getting the spotlight.
Yeah, and I always felt like I was a credit maker versus credit taker, but that lesson I don't think is ever fully learned until I don't even know if I'm done with that learning, but certainly I reflect back and I'm like, gosh, I was probably taking too much. I mean, I was definitely trying, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And it took a couple of missteps. It took a couple of experiments that didn't go so well, right? It took some change management efforts with, you and I have worked with some talent change management resources that are consultants.
We can give a shout out to
Jen Runkle.
Jen Runkle.
Boom, boom. She's
Runkle
worked at
Consulting.
Yeah, she's fantastic. If you want to talk to Jen, I'm a very, very high on Jen, and she's worked with me at McCormick, and Mylan, of course. So. That's another gift from Mylan, right? So 11 months have picked up Jen as well. So, but back to the point, I think, gosh, I'm in my mid 50s, and it took me, until my early 50s to figure that out.
Yeah.
And what I would hope is, through great work like this, is can you truncate that learning curve? I didn't have that. I had great folks that were mentoring me on my behavior and my influence and the tactics around strategy and how do you layer up your thinking. But I would say influence and change management, I never went to a class, I was never classically trained.
Right.
And it came through experimentation, mistakes,
Yes.
and also watching really great people execute it.
Exactly. But yeah, knowing how to do that and I agree with you. If you can truncate it, it's helpful. That's the purpose of doing this show, because I think there is a gap sometimes in truly preparing leaders and teaching them how to lead. It's a lot of, okay, you were a great individual contributor, so now you're going to be in charge of other individual contributors like you, and you know how that goes. A lot of times it's like, well, wait, so can I just still be the individual contributor but get paid more? And
right. Well,
like, what is my role now? What am I supposed to
and there's nothing wrong with getting paid more, to be clear.
Exactly. I'll take the money, but there's not a lot out there. And so my goal in talking with people like you, which is why I'm excited that you're here, is to share those lessons, to say, hey, here's some things that I learned, because it's a journey, it's not a destination. So here's some things that I've learned along my leadership journey that maybe can be helpful to somebody else, especially someone who is just starting out. Maybe there's someone listening who is a leader for the first time and is like, never thought to do it.
There's so many great books, but the practical experience and the practical application, right?
Do you have some favorites you want to share?
Well, I shared the one, right?
Yeah.
Make the Change Monster
Change
is
Monster,
great.
yeah.
I would say anything by Marshall Goldsmith is a good one. I don't know
Mhm.
if you're a Marshall Goldsmith fan, but there are some publications that he's
Yes.
got. And then I've got a few rags like, Good to Great.
Yep.
I love that book.
It is a good book.
And I love case studies, practical case studies.
Yeah.
The other one that is some may disagree, and I have high ADHD, so for me to read is tough. But Execution by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan is a fantastic.
I've heard of that one. Okay.
So that's a GE reference and a
Gotcha.
Lockheed Martin reference, and it speaks. It is much more clinical on the power of execution and how are you successful in overcoming some obstacles and setting forth a vision, things of that nature.
Yeah.
It's a dense read, but it's a very good read. And if I think of more, I'll send them to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think so. Another thing, as I'm listening to you, I think about something else that I find unique about you. That you have like all these dichotomies going on.
Uh-oh.
You have this high EQ. You have a lot of empathy, a lot of care and concern for people, but you're also a very results-driven person. And
that was a problem.
Yeah. So how do you do that? I mean, you've shared, a couple examples of having conversations with people, but sometimes I think people confuse if you care about someone, then, it's okay to lower your standards, or maybe you can't have high standards and also get results. And I'd just love to hear your perspective on that, because I, disagree with that.
So how about another shout out for Mylan awareness, because this was a transformational moment for me, which was the insights training that we did.
Yeah.
So the red, yellow,
Love
blue,
it.
green, we did that at McCormick, and I am a flaming hot red.
No.
Shocker. So, but I also, maybe to address your question head on, I think you lack empathy without clarity. Meaning, if you're not, if you don't display courage relative to what your expectations are, that leads to ambiguity, right?
Yes.
Lack of clarity, and frankly, high performers want to be held to a high standard. They want that clarity. They're like, okay, well, what does success look like? And having the courage, frankly, to have spirited debate, which I do with my VPs, and I love folks that feel like this is not a shout out that they can do more of it, but I do love folks that challenge me.
Absolutely.
Right. Respectfully, and they're bringing problems and solutions concurrently. But I think, again, another lesson learned later in life, and I've coached folks as recently at McCormick. I call them the high reds, and McCormick is a very blue culture.
Okay.
Where
very
Mylan,
analytical.
Yeah, and I viewed Mylan as a hybrid blue-red.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very.
So it was an interesting.
It's really it was a combination. Mostly
and I would say McCormick is blue, like really blue.
Okay.
Very regimented, very financial, and it served its well. So this is
this is a very old company, and old is a compliment because
it's been successful for a long time.
Exactly.
Right. And what processes, procedures, and principles, financially most notably, that are in place have served it so well.
Yes.
Right. So it's not meant to be anything other than a statement.
Yes.
Because I think you can be a successful yellow company as much as you can
Sure.
red. So, and folks will have to obviously read up on insights as to what the heck these colors mean.
Yes.
But red is a flaming hot desire to be results oriented, right?
Yes.
And that's me.
Competitive,
and so
fast paced. Yeah.
So the lesson, hearkening back to lessons learned is when, and I think this is what Mylan did do, which is the awareness of when you're up against a data-driven individual or someone that seeks out harmony, and you're a red, you are in a dangerous spot, and you got to check yourself before you wreck yourself, because you're likely going to bulldoze them, and they're going to get disenfranchised, and they're going to disengage.
Yeah, you'll lose them.
Right, and so I know for a fact that my weakness is when I get super passionate, because my ears shut off and my mouth goes too long, and I believe that I've curtailed that. I don't necessarily know if everyone around me would agree with that, but I definitely have worked on that, and I've been classically trained on listening skills, and I could probably take a refresher course, but I think as a red, that results orientation, back to your question, is having the confidence that results can come in different forms and sizes, and the path by which you achieve it as long as it's not encroaching legal standards and moral standards, things of that nature, that there are various ways to get to that figure. And getting comfortable with that discomfort, that it's a path that perhaps you wouldn't have taken.
Yes.
That I did not. So for me, early, and when I say early, probably through my early 40s, it was, we're going to deliver. And so the bulldoze was there, and whatever was behind me, there was carnage.
Right.
And some of the most valuable feedback I got from, again, the boss that I had for 12 years, Greg Newcomb, who anyone that's listening that worked at Heinz adored. I mean, he was just a gift. He said, look, people that aren't on your team need to feel as special as those that are.
Ooh.
And I was like, ooh, that is... It's one of those, gut punch moments that's really powerful that you can carry away.
Yeah.
He gave me another one, that also is applicable, which is, I need, when you are feeling the desire to accelerate because of your desire to deliver, I need you to mentally think about throttling down. Because what you do is you actually throttle up.
Yeah, it just adds fuel to the fire.
Right. And your energy is not being matched, and you're quick, at least he would say that. Again, my wife would disagree, and you're overpowering.
Yes.
And people aren't with you.
Yes.
And you think they're with you, but it's you're pushing them there versus pulling them along, and it's much more powerful to pull them along.
Absolutely.
And again, anyone that's worked with me, in my early 30s or 40s, is probably like, why is this guy on this podcast? Because he pushed really hard. I still think I was empathetic, but I have moderated dramatically that approach over the course of time.
Do you have
Does that answer your question? I think?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm so glad that you went there, because I think there's a lot of people that struggle with this. And number one, the awareness.
Yeah.
So that's huge that you had that awareness. And sometimes, it's very helpful to have a mentor, boss, somebody.
Kind of punch you in the head.
Yeah, 360, whatever it is,
Right.
Someone to sit down and give you that feedback. But then I'd love to hear any tactics or strategies that you used, to moderate yourself. I mean, I know I used to sit on my hands when I wanted to talk.
I will do this.
I love it.
Like I'm reflecting, but if I'm doing this, that means I want to say something.
But you're literally kind of holding
I'm
yourself
literally
back.
holding myself back. So if I'm in a meeting and I'm covering my mouth, I have intention. I really am trying to listen. I'm really trying to prevent myself from jumping.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people at home would say, "Can you please do that like every day?" But
we've never seen you
do that. Yeah, my daughters most notably. Yeah, I don't like for an opinion with them, but I'll do that. Okay. I will. The other one that I referenced earlier was, tell me more about that.
Yes.
So when you're passionate and you feel like you can almost feel it, right? And particularly if it's verging on, it's going down a path that you really disagree with, and you're starting to get upset. Like you feel like, it's like, and that gets back to another phrase that I was given, frankly, just about 3 years ago. So this gives you a sense that you're always learning, is assume positive intent. Right? Huge. I wish I got that at 40 versus 51. And boy, what a valuable statement. That came from a VP of supply chain who's no longer with McCormick, Kurt Craig. And Kurt and I had challenges, and he's like, and I gave, it was one of those moments where it was a defining moment for both of our functions. At least I thought so, which is, look, we can't be successful without one another. And I feel like we're combating one another. And I kind of give you what I see, but I really want to hear what you see.
Yeah.
And so we got together, and he gave me that phrase, and I'm like, gosh, I wish I had that a while ago. And so I think that, tell me more about this, and assume positive intent. Like, okay, no one is coming into the building to undermine your function, Bill, or undermine you. I'd like to think.
Yeah, truly. I mean, there are very few people out there that are truly that malicious.
Yeah, right.
I think at the end of the day, everyone's really just trying to do the best that they can.
I'd like to think.
Yeah.
I'd like to think. There's definitely pockets where that's not true,
Sure.
but I do think that that's the anomaly. And again, boy, I wish I learned that earlier. And that gets to influence, and that gets to rallying a broader cause. And frankly, in my role or subsequent roles beyond this, if I didn't have that skill, I wouldn't be in the chair.
Yeah.
But, that's something that you can absolutely refine. So those are 2-3 tactics.
Yeah,
some of them are just
so
mental.
great.
Like that gift from Greg that was when I was 35, 36 years old. That throttled down, and I'm like, okay. And he was the one that sent me to the listening class too, which was a Cornell class. I don't know, Jenny. I'll look her up on LinkedIn. I'll send it to you. But
Okay.
Jenny from Cornell, she's no longer with Cornell, taught that class, and she was awesome.
That's
Awesome.
great.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines is "Help me understand."
That's a good one. That's a good one
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
because again, you may, to your point, may be going down a certain path that you know and believe is the right path. And I think for you, again, this is where your IQ and your EQ may butt heads too, because you are an analytical person. You can back those decisions up. If you think you're right,
I'll go fast.
Yeah. So
Plus, that's the desire to execute.
Exactly.
I'm very impatient.
Yeah.
Like I want to go.
Same. Yeah. So then
So-
it's like, ooh, but you, thank goodness that you value learning and curiosity, because for me, that's how I leverage that aspect of my personality too, is, okay, well, wait a second, maybe I don't know all the answers, or maybe I don't have all the information. So help me understand where you're coming from. Help me understand why you're so passionate that we go this direction, and I'm so passionate that we go this direction. And I think it's a very neutral
It is.
statement.
I would say I'm still learning on that front, really. I mean, if I'm being honest. And again, I think as Irish, German, passionate, heavy, red, I've got lots of things working against me. ADHD, I've got a lot of things I got to
be a real jerk. Though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty that would say that too. But
but that's the cool thing too, and I think it's important. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's important to point out that people do change and people do
100%.
evolve. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes we carry someone's reputation with them forever, and we don't give them the benefit of
it's hard to rebrand
evolution.
yourself.
It is.
It's really hard to rebrand yourself, and particularly if you've had. I've watched it, and I've coached people into leaving organizations. Not that I want that; it breaks your heart. But if you know that their brand has been put in a place where they can't overcome it, it's unfair to them, right?
Yes.
And I've been there. I mean, I've absolutely been there, and I deserved the spot that I put myself in, and I get it.
You don't argue it.
I don't argue it. I don't agree with how it was, deduced. But in fairness, I put myself there, and you can try to weave yourself out, but it comes with maturity. It comes with reflection, education. The notion of self improvement, and the ability, and frankly, the ability to reflect and really. I think about. I started to meditate probably 10 years ago. I've done that off and on, primarily for stress management, but I've got other outlets now, as you know. But meditation is a really powerful, clarifying place. And if you are a hard charger, boy, is that counter to everything that you believe, which is to pause, reflect, and get into a mind space that you're at peace with yourself. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
There's a lot of people that really struggle with that. They'll just outright say, I can't do it. I can't meditate.
Yeah, I don't think I'm good.
Which
and
is a great reason to try it.
Yeah, I agree. And I should do it more, is what I would say. I'm not, it's not like every day I'm sitting, on a mat and meditating, but I'm at least conscious of where my blind spots are too. And I think that comes with time too.
I think so too.
Yeah,
I'm going to springboard off the meditation topic because I know that you are an avid cyclist.
Yes.
Cycler. How do you say it?
Cyclist.
Okay.
Yeah. This could take us an hour. Right?
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
But I do want to hear, because again, I know that you're a very busy executive, yet you also make time to bring physical fitness into your world, and I do think of you as a healthy person. So I'm just curious, because I know it can be really hard for any of us, but especially executives. How has that impacted your life? What are the things that you do? How do you prioritize that?
Yeah, so that again came later in life, and it came after the death of my dad. And I watched him struggle. He was I consider a young man. He was 66 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so diabetic, overweight, just had a lot of things working against him. And I was 39 at the time. And I was probably 240 pounds. I'm sitting here today at 183.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm like a little waif of what I used to be. And I would say the one thing that I haven't perfected, which anyone anyone that knows me, I ride to eat, and I don't eat well. So
I
I'm
used to have a shirt that said, I run to eat
run
chocolate
to,
cake.
yeah, I have my motivation is calorie neutral riding. That's kind
Love
of it.
it.
So the catalyst event was my dad passing, and I really, at that point in time, I had two young girls, 6 and 3, and it was a stressful time for us as a family, and those moments, those are huge catalyst moments, right? As it relates to, where am I,
Yes.
and am I in a good place?
Mhm.
And is this path that I'm on, and what he went through, am I on a similar journey?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I didn't
Yes.
feel like it was completely analogous, but boy, it really hit me emotionally, spiritually, on multiple dimensions. It
Yeah.
hit me, as it would with anybody. And
Mhm.
so I didn't find cycling. I started working out
Okay.
immediately. It was elliptical. It was, I can't run because I've got arthritis, and I'm just a mess when it comes to that. So it was always low impact stuff.
Mhm.
But there's only so many hours you can spend on elliptical before you go crazy, right?
It is
And
like being on a hamster wheel.
I'm like, I've
Especially for that ADHD is not good for that.
no, and there was no streaming either. There was no Netflix back then,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
I'm DVDing, whatever it was. I can't even remember what shows I was watching, but I think it was How I Met Your Mother. But nonetheless, I'm going through these, and I'm like, okay, and I didn't feel like I was breaking through. Like I kind of plateaued,
Mhm.
and I got the weight down, and I was sleeping better, I was feeling better, but I didn't feel like I fully achieved it. And so I got back, and I didn't cycle per se, but I loved to get out
Yeah.
when I was younger, in my 20s, and I had a similar experience where I lost a ton of weight. And I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll do that. And so I bought a bike, and I started riding, and then the bug that got me, and here's another Heinz reference, is a guy by the name of Stu Mason, who I
Mhm.
absolutely adore, who's a finance guy by trade, but a cyclist too. And he's like, you should go out with me. And Stu, I think, was trying to convince me not to ride because he kicked my butt. And I'm like, I just want to ride flat roads because that's all I ever did.
Right.
And he took me up into the hills of Pittsburgh.
Oh my gosh.
And the first year I did, maybe 1,200 miles. And
Jeez.
then all of a sudden I'm like, gosh, I feel different. I feel
Mhm.
good. And so I won't belabor the journey, but last year I did 13,500 miles.
Oh my gosh.
So I spent a
Wait,
lot.
what is that average? Because I'm not a mathematician. But what does that average out to on like a
It's
weekly,
I do about
daily kind of basis?
I do an average of 40 miles when I ride, 40 to
Wow.
50. I just did a 100-mile charity ride last
Yes.
weekend in
Very
Columbus for cancer, which several family members in my immediate family have had bouts with cancer and survived. So I felt really compelled. I don't race. It's all just really for physical fitness.
You
And
ride for a long time. I mean,
I
this
do. I'll do
is
2.5, 3 hours before work. I will
yeah.
leave at 5. So I think what I've done, and certainly it comes with flexibility. I think is a direct reflection of the company you work for.
Mhm.
What values do they have? McCormick is remarkably flexible with me and others,
That's
everyone,
great.
in my opinion, relative to family, relative to community, relative to health.
Mm.
I feel like I've just landed a sweet spot as it relates
Yeah.
to what I can do. So my amplification of cycling actually came while I was at McCormick. I mean, it was certainly starting at Milan,
Yeah, I think you
but
were
not.
still somewhat on the elliptical journey when
I
I
think
knew you
I was
too.
starting to cycle, but
Yeah.
not that.
This
I mean, maybe
level.
3,000
Yeah.
miles. Yeah. So I will go out early. I have a group of friends. Both I have a house in Jersey and I have a house in Pittsburgh, and I've got wonderful friends that I've met over the years that are avid cyclists that have similar passions and just wonderful human beings. Probably close to 20, 25 great people that I've met that I would have never met before.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you have this whole little community that you
Yeah.
built.
So it came from really unfortunate space. It led to a lot of productivity for me personally. I had blood pressure issues. I had I was overweight, and now I don't have blood pressure issues. I have my physical health is big, and I think, and I've had other instances prior to starting that journey where stress was also having an impact on me, which you also alluded to in when we were opening up for this.
Yeah.
And I think anyone that allows that to eat you up is playing with fire. I've seen a lot of people have some really unfortunate events with with stress, and it doesn't.
Yes.
Someone can look incredibly fit, and
And
I
can think they've
yeah.
got it together.
So I view it as it has to happen, not
Mhm.
whether it's going to happen. And my leadership team and my team knows that I view it that way, and I also espouse it to others. Meaning,
Awesome.
I don't really care what you do to be healthy, but I want you to be healthy,
Yes.
and I don't care when you choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're getting your job done. So if you do it first thing in the morning, if you choose to do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and that's your time,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to block that time. I want you to, and by the way, that I don't get to ride every day. Like if my
Sure.
boss calls a meeting, I got to go. But
Yeah.
for the most part, I've been afforded the flexibility. I've made it a priority, and I'm afforded that, and I think we've afforded others in our community to do that too.
But that's so important.
Yeah, I didn't learn that for a while either, and had medical setbacks and had challenges, and fortunately not so much in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. So what do you tell yourself when you have those days where you've got a million things on the to-do list and you're like, maybe I should just go into the office and skip that ride today?
I don't think that's happened recently, but because I'm so passionate, I'm really just so passionate.
Which is great.
Yeah. And I do. I would say a number of my rides are just by myself, and I find that the headspace that transpires, meaning what I can process and what I can, because I'll be thinking, and I will take notes. I'll pull over off my bike and I'll take some notes. I'll send an email to myself. The clarity that comes with that for me, it doesn't happen for everybody, but for me, it provides that. So I view it as a tool.
Yeah, you actually are working.
Yeah,
your brain doesn't stop.
I don't think. My boss wouldn't agree with that, but
right.
but he's highly supportive, and as have the previous three. And in my mind, if I weren't getting the work done, or if somebody on my team wasn't getting the work done, and they view that as a priority. But I've got several cyclists on my team. I've got folks that are massively passionate about they're triathletes, and
awesome.
and others that that will do CrossFit or other things that they need to do just to get that stress level down and that clarity of purpose and thinking. So I don't. It's pretty rare for me to allow what you described to happen.
Good.
Because I view it as that important, because I know what I am without it.
Yes.
And I'm not
effective.
Yeah, and I'm not effective. I don't have the same energy level. I don't have the staying power for engagement. And these are long days. My meetings start typically 8:39 and they go until 6, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's a long day.
Yes.
And there's weeks, there's I found the balance for me and my family. It's not perfect, but it works for us.
Yeah.
But in the absence of that outlet, I know for a fact I would have problems on multiple fronts.
Yes, I do. And I think it's important too, because you set yourself up as a good role model for that team, that it gives them a permission slip to prioritize it as well. Because I think sometimes, again, you've got that power differential going on. It doesn't matter what level you are in the company. If you have someone that you report to, you're automatically going to be
there's a bit
cautious.
of mirroring and mimicking.
Yeah,
right?
and what's accepted, what's not accepted. Is this safe? Is this okay? Yeah, I want to make sure that I come across as hardworking and competent and high performing and all those good things. And it's like, oh, okay, well, if he's doing it and he says that it works for him and it's okay for me to do it too. You give them that permission slip.
100%. I think one of not to digress too much, but one of the few benefits of COVID is it taught us the importance of that balance in a big way. Just I am not Zoom fatigue for me is very real. It's remarkable, and you can see it with your team. And I'm like, look, you've got to. I call it the passive meeting, and some of my meetings are passive meeting. I'm transmitting something. You don't have to You don't have to necessarily participate. You have to listen.
Yeah.
I said, but if you want to walk during my meeting, okay, go. Get out. So we set that standard. Like, look, you just got to get out. You cannot sit in your chair in an office, and we're still Zooming at McCormick, which is fine.
Yes.
But you got to move.
Yes.
You got to move.
Yes.
Right. So I do think, and the company has a really great track record as it relates to health, wellness, and taking care of its people, and I just feel like this is a natural byproduct of that. right? So
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What have we left on the table here? I feel
I
like
don't
I
know. You
literally
tell
could
me.
just keep going
Yeah,
for
keep
hours
going.
and hours and hours. And I guess, given all of the learnings that you've had thus far in your career, what currently keeps you up at night as a leader?
Yeah, that was one of the questions you hit me with.
Yeah.
Can I reference my notes?
Absolutely.
So what's it'll be cliche, but I'll put it out there, and I see it right now as the war for talent
Yes.
is just remarkable. And when I say that, I think there's been seismic shifts on so many dimensions of our society.
Mm-hmm.
And most notably, what COVID did is it reset the bar
Mm-hmm.
as it relates to what work is and what it is not. And it's not only just, and then you've also got generational differences. I see it in my
Yes.
kids. So now I'm at the
Yes.
stage where I'm like, okay, where are their values intersecting with what my values were
Yes.
at that same stage of my life and early career?
Yes.
It's really fascinating. And so the ability for leadership, and I just had this with one of my VPs, like, hey, what should our expectation be for people in role? Like, how long should they stay? I stayed 2 years when I started out. I'm like, that's not what they expect. Like, they feel like mastery of craft happens within a year or less, right? So there's that dimension of speed.
Yes.
And how transient things, particularly at the early stages of the recruitment process.
Right.
There's hyper learning, hyper growth as it relates to experience. And you think about just how younger generations, not that I'm dating myself, but I am, like how they consume data, how they consume media.
Everything's just faster and more. And
yeah, and the processing power is there.
Yes.
So that's interesting. And then there's a set of conditions like that. I was fortunate that I didn't have to move,
Mm-hmm.
but most on my team have, and most of those that are in the director or VP level have moved many, many times, and that
Yes.
is not the reality today.
No,
So
and that used to be a main stipulation,
sure,
especially in larger companies,
sure.
that if you wanted to progress up in the company, you had to
Had to do it,
physically
right?
move.
Yeah, my uncle did it. My dad, not so much, but
Mm-hmm.
and countless salespeople for sure. And now it's
Yeah.
you've got what, my wife has got a great job or my husband's got a great job, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not willing to do this.
Yes.
And I love Austin or I love Pittsburgh or I
Mm-hmm.
love whatever
Or I want
pick
to work remote and I don't
right.
want to go into a building anymore.
Yeah, so now that challenges the narrative and it challenges how you recruit. And
Yes.
you've got, and then the other thing that's really fascinating is you've got a set of employees that are there with a set of conditions, and
Mm-hmm.
now the conditions are changing.
Yes.
So I think that from the war on talent and just what the currency is beyond compensation is being
Mm-hmm.
redefined pretty rapidly.
Yes.
The other one that keeps me, so that's one that keeps me up at night. We haven't had a heavy retention issue, which is we're
That's
blessed.
great.
Yeah, that's blessed. That speaks to the company and the leaders underneath me and everything else. But I think the other one for me, which I think is true for many, is competency relevancy, meaning the competencies that made you successful yesterday are moving so fast.
Ooh.
Right. So what a
Yes.
we call it the migration from sales manager to general manager.
Mm-hmm.
So what it takes to be successful across the desk
Mm-hmm.
with a Walmart, a Kroger, and Albertsons is so much more multivariable, multidimensional, multifunctional
Mm-hmm.
than where it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago when I started my journey, 8 years ago when I started my journey at McCormick. So
Yeah.
even my framing of the story I use with Randy on revenue management thing, that's like table stakes. That stuff was not necessarily revolutionary, but
Yeah.
it was certainly very different for McCormick at the time, and it was pretty
Yes.
different for the industry. Well, now it's like everyone's got a revenue growth management team. Everyone has a series of capabilities on omni and digital, but the salesperson, their bag in terms of what they're expected to influence has grown,
Mm-hmm.
and not all those competencies come with experience. Some of it comes through influence. Where do I go?
Yes.
How do I acquire this? And so it gets back to that hiring process on, agility, learning orientation, general management. Like, do you want a general manager calling on Walmart or do you want a salesperson calling on Walmart? And also, frankly, not all customers are created equal, like any
Sure.
industry, and certain requirements are different. So that competency mapping / call it revolution,
Mm-hmm.
contemporization,
Mm-hmm.
all of that to me, I don't feel like we're moving fast enough. I really do. That to me makes me uncomfortable because to me, the biggest contract I have with my team beyond clarity of purpose and safety and the things that they would expect in any relationship with a leader is putting them in a position to be successful.
Yeah.
Full stop. Like I've got to put them in a position to be successful. I always tell my team, like, we are around our table because there are almost now 225 people that are depending on us to make the right call on their behalf.
Yes.
And that is
huge responsibility.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. But I always, that's where I get agitated or uncomfortable, not agitated meaning upset, more like, ooh, I'm unsettled because have we done enough? Yeah. Have we done enough to put them in a position, or have we created centers of excellence to augment capacity?
Right, because there's so much emphasis placed on getting people in the door, but then once they're in the door, how do you continue to figure out, are they still that right person for that role?
Yeah,
are
and that
they
evolves.
better served for somewhere else? I mean, what do you do with them, once they're in the door to make sure that they can keep growing and evolving?
I think we do a decent job. We're not perfect. I mean, we're not a huge organization like some of our consumer products peers, but we do have quite a bit. But in my mind, that's a forever perfectable objective is to put your people in a position to be successful. And
absolutely.
And I feel, COVID has been an interesting time to reflect, but it also has put many organizations in duress mode on supply chain, and inflation is obviously just one that's remarkable. And that, we are literally activating. Right, we are working to activate versus, okay, we need to reflect because this thing is still moving, still evolving, and the practical reality is the activation bucket is overflowing, but it doesn't mean that our people don't need this contemporization work. So we've actually started to re-embark on some of that, but that's what again, those two are probably my biggest. As it relates to work.
Yes.
What keeps me up at night most is making sure my girls are safe and they're loved and they're cared for and they're successful. But beyond the family, that's what keeps me up at night.
And I realized I didn't ask you the very important question that I ask all my guests, which is, what is your definition of leadership?
So I actually wrote this one down. I struggled most with this one.
Really?
I did, yeah, because first of all, far be it from me to define it, and so
Bill Simon's
definition
for Bill.
Yeah, for Bill. Yeah, I mean, I would tell you what has kind of struck me is I do think the ability to craft a vision, a story that tugs on the heartstrings that is beyond just the fundamentals of the work. And I've succeeded sometimes at that. And I think at McCormick right now, I need to reinvigorate that. I feel like I started great, and then we went into a space, most notably recently, to just pure execution mode. And I feel like we just need to rekindle that. So that's just me being very honest. But I think the best windows is when that rally has hit a bullseye and folks feel like they've crafted it. They've had a chance to influence it, and then the rally almost there's so much momentum behind that rally, right? So that ability to storytell, to paint that vision, to paint where we're going and why, in a very thoughtful, humble, vulnerable fashion is really, really important. The other thing that I wrote down is I personally have always felt invigorated by folks that have stretched me to the point where I did something I didn't think that was possible for me personally or professionally.
Oh, love that.
Right. So, and there's no bigger charge than, I mean, certainly promoting someone and watching them excel as they advance their careers. Some of the best moments that you'll ever have as a leader, at least in my opinion. But watching someone unlock like a portion of them and the excitement that comes with that when that unlock clicks. And you've had a chance. You're not. Anyone that says they're the architect of that is lying. They've provided the catalyst event, perhaps. They've provided the opportunity for, like, I would say another one for me is that's really emotional for me is watching someone that is wildly talented, that has undervalued their talent and their skill, and you're able to, and it gets back to what they, watching them achieve what they didn't think was possible. But the most rewarding is that, in my opinion. And I've had so many experiences. It usually happens early in someone's career, and I still take an active role, not as much as I'd like, because I can't, frankly, just it's not practical. But I do have some. I do have some pretty close relationships with folks that are early stages of their career, or I'm just happen to be a mentor, and oh my gosh, that is the most. From a definition of leadership in my mind is teaching them what's possible and letting them really truly achieve.
Yeah, and then watching them go after that.
Yeah, and getting out of the way.
Yes.
Like, look, you've got this. Like, let me just give you I'm going to just give you a couple keys, but there's like 30 keys you got to use, but you just need these two, and you're gonna just really excel.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I don't know if that helps, but that's how I define it.
That's like
that works.
I mean, I know we're not able to physically hold this mic.
I don't know if that's a mic drop moment. I could do a riff on the mic if you want. Yeah.
No, I love that. I'm glad that I remembered that I didn't ask that
question, it's all good.
Because we would have missed all of that.
All good.
What else did I miss?
Let's see. Okay, well, you got definition.
Help me out here.
up at night. Oh, you said person who shaped me the most.
Yeah.
I think we talked about.
Yeah. So you've had some great.
I have. I've been
career.
Really blessed. The ones that for me that. So if you want me to answer, I assume you want me to answer these questions. Yeah. Okay, I'll name them, and they know who they are. But I mentioned Greg. So Greg was by far the most profound, because I think he took, I just admire his patience with me as a flaming hot red,
as an eager beaver,
that was just, and I was more emotive. I hadn't learned the nuances of influence, and gosh, he put himself out there for me. I mean, he absolutely advocated for me when I would argue I didn't deserve it. You know what I mean? Like he
saw that.
He saw it, and I think he insulated me. I think, and I didn't realize that until later. And he's, I haven't seen him in years, probably 7 or 8, similar to the last time we saw each other live. But I adore him, and he had a profound impact on me personally and professionally. And another one that I wrote down was John Bennett, who was my second boss at McCormick. And John and I worked at Heinz for almost a decade, but I never worked for him. I always worked with him. And John is another guy that you reflect on the moments where someone impacts you personally and professionally, and he did that, and he gave me some gifts. He gave me a phrase that I haven't used yet. So I gave you some of my favorite phrases, but one of them is go to the balcony.
Go to the balcony.
Go to the balcony.
Say more about that.
So this gets back to, Bill is on a constant learning journey. It's and it gets back to Kurt's statement of a positive intent, but it was before that. So John gave me that gift about probably 7 years ago. And he said, Bill, I want you to rise above and see everyone and who they are and what they're trying to accomplish before you engage.
Ooh.
Try to assess their motivations. Try to assess where they're going, and really let that play out. And it was all under the auspices of, again, execution first and figure it out later. And he said the power of them, and it just gets back to that influence role, particularly when you go higher and you've got a broader remit, but the pressure's higher, right? So
sure.
So that struggle of delivery versus, gosh, I got to wait for all these people to come along for the ride.
Yeah.
And do it productively and thoughtfully. So he gave me that, and I, it's one of those ones like throttle down, positive intent, go to the balcony.
Go to the balcony. I have not heard that. I love that.
And another one, which was an HRBP, this is many years ago, Natalie McComb, who is...
I think she wrote you a recommendation too.
Did she?
I feel like it.
She may have. Natalie.
As I stalked your recommendations.
A lot of these people, if she did, God bless her. I don't even know how she justified that. But Natalie knew me in my early stages at Heinz too, and she had a profound influence on just how do you really get to the next level thoughtfully and appropriately. And this was a defining moment for me, and she probably doesn't even know that, but it was wear the suit you want to wear.
Ooh, yeah.
Which is, Bill, you're playing down, you're not playing up, and then translating that statement to, it has to be genuine. It has to be
Yes.
thoughtful. It has to be, and it gets back to a little bit of advocacy, but if you want to be a VP, do the work that a VP does.
Yeah.
Right? Engage
Think like a
think,
VP
yeah,
would.
and that sounds easy, but that statement is far too simple.
Yes.
And there's tentacles off of that are
For
pronounced.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But that came in, again, I think my late 30s when I think it was my late 30s, it may have been mid, but it doesn't matter. It was one that I carried with me. I still use it to this day.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
What else you got on that list?
I don't know. Let me see. We talked about mantras and quotes. Oh, you said redo moment.
Yeah.
That was a tough one for me. I do believe that a personal philosophy is no regrets. I tell my kids that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, look, you know,
nothing wasted.
nothing
right?
wasted.
It's all
And by the way,
experience.
looking in the rearview mirror, there's nothing that's going to change there.
Sure.
Right? There's
Yeah, you
nothing
can't go
that's going
back
to
anyway.
change in the past.
Yeah.
You can dwell on it, and I can do that too. But that
Mhm.
is wasted effort, wasted time. How do you
Mhm.
focus on the future? And I don't necessarily have regrets on any experiences. I don't have any regrets on decisions that I've made in terms of companies or choices that I've
Yeah.
made per se. I have regrets on interactions that I had early where I was, a punk kid that
Mhm.
didn't know what he didn't know, and I
Yeah.
didn't get I feel like, gosh, I learned a lot, but I think there are folks that I would just say, you know what, thank you for being patient.
Right.
Thank you for dealing with what was clearly not the most optimal version of me.
Yeah.
So those moments are where I would like to go back and just, kind of give them a big old hug, or just say, can I grab you a beer because you dealt with a
Mhm.
lot. And
Mhm.
but nothing, I made many mistakes, but those mistakes always, from my vantage point anyway, nothing was so cataclysmic that it was regret. It was,
Yes.
man, I can take a lot of learning from this.
Well, yeah, and it's just a constant course correction.
Yeah. So I thought that was a
trying
really
it
that was
out.
a twister for
That was
me.
a twist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Redo moments. Yeah.
You said best advice. We already hit that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you said personal values. And I did write those down if you want. I did write those down if
Yeah,
you
I
want.
didn't ask you that. Tell us
I think we've
about
hit
your...
most of them. I'm a big effort guy.
Mhm.
And a lot of these also stem or migrate into my interview philosophy. I always, for me, I didn't grow up, this is like the classic, like, hey, where'd you grow up and what'd you do? Well, I cut lawns. I worked at Friendly's. I worked 2 jobs. Friendly's.
I love Friendly's.
I was the ice cream scooper,
Yes.
Yeah, I can make a mean sundae. Jim Dandy, if you want a Jim Dandy, I can make that. Mine was the Reese's Pieces sundae.
Love
I
those
worked
the
in,
best.
so I, and my dad instilled that, my mom instilled that. I worked when I was 12, so,
Mhm.
and not that is a prerequisite for success, but boy, is it really interesting to see the difference of someone that had to bust it
Yes.
to get it done.
Yes. Doesn't take things for granted or expect
Yeah, and
things to be served up.
And there's just a whole host of really interesting characteristics that are very consistent that come off of effort.
Yes.
And when I say effort, like personal effort, work effort, and ethic.
Yeah.
So that's one that's big. The one and only time where I will bristle anymore is respect. And I just believe, and I'm not perfect at it either. And I've always said to people, if I've ever crossed it, I want you to grab me and I want you to hit me with a brick. Like, that is not, you deserve that in the workplace and frankly in any condition. So for me, respect, humility, the things that come with that are such underpinnings of future success.
Yeah.
We talked this one, and this is a tough one to deduce in an interview, but you can see it pretty quickly when you're in a team. It's problem identifiers versus solution providers.
Love that.
Right. So a personal and this was and part of it is, has the team been conditioned to just elevate problems because they don't feel the empowerment, or are they just incapable?
Or are they just complaining?
Complaining, fine.
Yeah.
Or are they just incapable of solutions?
Yeah.
Like, that's just not their skill set, which is frankly problematic, right?
Yeah.
Because every role that at least I think we have at McCormick requires that symbiotic relationship. And I always say, don't drop, a mess on my desk, like I want to see what you're thinking about it. Like what would
Yeah.
you do? Let's work this together. So that problem identifier, I always say I've got plenty of them. I don't need
Yes.
more of them.
Yes.
I need creative solution providers, right? So that's one.
That is so
We
true.
talked about caring and empathy, and I'm a big, not everyone subscribes to this. In fact, I've been coached pretty aggressively at times in my career on levity, and I believe levity, like, is really important to not take
Yeah.
yourself too seriously.
Mhm.
I probably go a tad too far at times, but I do think that demonstrates accessibility, particularly when levity is at your not at anyone's expense, right? Like
No,
never
no.
disrespectful, never cutting, but it suggests approachability. It suggests,
Yeah.
we're not taking ourselves too seriously. Like I always
Yeah.
say at McCormick, like we're selling food. We're selling some of the best food in the world.
Yes.
We are we are
Nobody's gonna
blessed.
die today. It's
Yeah, right.
okay.
And we're
Yeah.
blessed to sell great products, and let's
Yes.
let's let's keep all of that in perspective. So levity's a good
Yeah.
one for me too. Those are
I
the ones I
love
wrote down.
that. Well, I've been coached very aggressively on that as well. So I personally relate to
Yeah.
and give support to,
Levity and use of it
levity
appropriately, right?
appropriately.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I think it creates an openness,
Yeah.
and you spend so many hours a day working.
Sure.
So if you can have fun while you're doing it or have
Absolutely.
an enjoyable environment, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah. Exactly right. So
But levity doesn't mean you don't have the ability to be a critical thinker.
no, I can move from levity into full on operational mode in about 30 seconds. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, my team's seen that happen. They're like, what just
What
happened?
just happened? Where did fun Bill go?
Yeah. No, that's
Bring him
over.
back.
Yeah, we got some stuff to
We
do.
gotta get some,
Yeah, we got some
stuff
things
done.
to get done. Yeah. So anyway,
Awesome.
those are the
Oh,
ones
that's
that
so
you fed me.
good.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
Anything else that's come to mind that we didn't cover? I know we've bounced around, but that's what you get with two ADHD people.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it. So thank you for affording me the opportunity. Hopefully it's helpful. Hey, if someone gets some assistance out of it, that's
Yeah,
great. And
that's the goal.
and no, I guess the only thing I would say is, everyone's journey's different. I've learned, the other thing that I these are more lessons for my girls. I'm like, don't tolerate not being happy, and
Mm-hmm.
I've and it's hard when you're particularly early in your career and you're unhappy to try to create a catalyst for change, particularly when family's involved or you've
Yes.
got personal preference and location and things of that nature. But
Yes.
boy, to your point on how much time we spend, I think
Mm-hmm.
back early when I was unhappy and I tried to muscle through it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are again lessons that I learned later, which is, so
Yeah.
much of my success is predicated on safety. Safety is something too,
Yes.
right? And happiness and things of that nature where you
Yes.
can again be your true self. So, I just think of that as a tremendous catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard because unfortunately, I'd like to think that I'd like to again think that I'm a decent leader, that folks say, you know what, he genuinely cares about me, but I've also encountered folks that aren't, and
Yes.
there's nothing more debilitating, and I think
Yeah.
no one deserves that.
Don't stay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no
that
one
is
deserves that,
not- yeah.
and it doesn't mean you have to get out tomorrow. You don't have to do something
No.
rash, but
No.
no, I
But don't feel like you have to stay. I guess I should have said it. And
Yeah.
there are options, and I do feel like especially younger folks who are just starting out in many cases are chasing a number versus an experience.
Yeah, and they're more
or,
vulnerable, right? Like they
Yeah.
also don't, like, the other thing that, and you and I talked about this many years ago, is the power of culture, and it's really hard to
Mhm.
deduce what the culture is, and
Mhm.
finding what culture fits you, and not all cultures would work for me, but they would work for other people.
Right. And there's subcultures within a company. So,
100%.
if I love working for you and I like the culture you've created within our department and
Yeah.
our team, great. But then suddenly if you move to another department and I get somebody else in as my leader, same company, could be a completely different subculture
100%.
that comes in.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that as I talk to people early in their career, that is the one area where you try to spend some time on how do you deduce that, right? And
Yes.
how do you think about what you're walking into?
Yeah.
And because really, until you walk into it, you don't
You don't know.
But
Yeah, but
there
knowing
are
your
ways.
values. I mean, you talked about values. I think
Mhm.
being aware of what your own personal values are and then how they ladder up to whatever organization you're joining.
No doubt, and how they reapply. Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
But that'd be the only other couple things that offer you at this time.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
I enjoyed
you.
it.
Me too.
Yeah, thanks.
And you get the award for driving the farthest distance to be a guest on this show. 4 hours.
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah, but I was coming back to Pittsburgh, so
well, you don't have to mention that part.
Yeah. I drove 4 hours, people.
He drove 4 hours to be here. All right. Well, given that you and I both love levity, we have
these are
the lightning round.
Oh, the lightning round. I forgot that we were going to do a lightning round.
The lightning round,
So I feel like we. Okay.
Okay, hang on. Let me pull my.
Is this like literally lightning round?
Here.
Like
yeah. So this is how it works.
Okay.
Answer as many questions as you can in 60 seconds.
Oh, I'm not good with this. This is not. This is
But you're competitive, so let's see
I
how
am,
you
but
do.
I'm also going to freeze up. This is going to be high pressure.
Okay. Are you ready?
Oh, I don't know.
On your mark, get set, go. What season best fits your personality?
Oh, summer.
Okay. Yes, finally. What's your most used emoji in text?
Oh, it's the scrunchy kind of like squirrely face. I can't even describe it. It's like what?
Like the awkward face.
Yeah,
like,
the awkward. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Oh, gosh. Book, song, or podcast? I would think any Mitch Albom book would have an impact on me.
Oh, yeah, good one. Okay. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
They don't know I ever wrote poetry.
Wrote poetry.
Wrote poetry.
Ooh, okay. That's going to be the next episode.
Okay.
Back on. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on
bicycles.
Yeah, I knew that. What celebrity would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, who was Goose in Top Gun? Anthony Edwards,
yes!
Right? I've been told, and I think I look like him right now too. I think. How did I do?
You did great.
I got stuck on
the book, song, movie, or podcast.
Yeah.
You know, you could always just say this podcast.
I could have.
Yeah.
I could have just, but I wanted to provide some texture that people could potentially gravitate to. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much. Thank you for driving 4 hours to be
absolutely.
here. This has been awesome.
I enjoyed it.
We'll have you come back.
Okay.
And you can read poetry that you
Poetry?
wrote.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's from high school, but yeah. I probably could give you another one that's unknown, like javelin thrower. How about
Javelin thrower.
Yeah,
Nice.
I did that in high school and college.
Did you do jarts?
Yeah, no,
not
so much. No, never done pickleball either. I got to do that for the first.
Super fun.
I've heard.
Super fun. Yeah, highly recommend it.
Okay, got to get after it.
All right, maybe that'll be the next video podcast. Bill and Laura play pickleball.
Yeah, we could have like a series of stuff that Bill and Laura do. I like that. That's good.
I love it. All right.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have on today's episode. Be sure to join us on our next episode of Leadership Rediscovered. And until then, keep shining, everyone.